and multiples category is very, very unique to the art market. And what I think is really interesting and exciting about the prints and multiples market, particularly at the moment with a lot of conversation going on around it's a safe haven in a difficult financial climate. Let's be really clear about what we mean. Going out and buying a primary artwork from a primary artist gallery is a wonderful, rewarding thing to do. But in reality, there are no comparable values. There's nothing to say that that artist is going to rise in value, become incredibly important. I think what people should be talking about in investing in art is the prints and multiples market, because essentially what you've got is a comparables market. So the market is a lot more similar to the wine market, the car market, the watch market, where you have a journey that an edition, a series goes in its lifetime. When we look at an artwork that has no comparables, we can estimate a value on it. And there's a wonderful model called auction that allows for people to bid until a fair market value is essentially created by the auction model. With the prints and multiples market, it doesn't really work like that. There is a fair market value for that print within that series at any given time because of the historical values as it goes through time and other numbers are sold from that series. So you have the ability to be much surer in your approach to collecting. I don't think that you can emulate outside of the prints and editions category within the art market. So when we came up with the concept for MyPortfolio, we really looked at what sellers needed, and there are 4 key motivations for a seller. One is the motivation of investment returns. So they bought originally, perhaps just for passion and investment, and now they're looking to release the value of that investment. The second is financial returns because they need it and they need to move it relatively quickly, so they need to release funds. The third is lack of exhibition space. So they may be downsizing, maybe moving, just don't have the actual wall space to be able to enjoy their collection. And the fourth is content or collecting motivations, which might be that they were a collector of urban and contemporary, and as they've maybe built a family or partner where they actually would like to go through this collecting journey with somebody else, the motivations have slightly changed and they'd like to resell and they'd like to buy something that's more suitable for their lifestyle now. What MyPortfolio does is it allows you to track the value of your collection and make those decisions against those different motivations in your own time and always within your own control. So we essentially sat down to map out what a dashboard, a collection dashboard would look like if we wanted to ensure there was a high level of personalization. So you can upload your collection, add the value that you bought the artwork for, and then track the increase or decrease of value in the current market. Access, so we're very fortunate at MyArtBroker to have one of the largest databases of collectors that collect prints and editions. It's a very niche but large network. And that means that we have the access and of supply and demand at any one time for most of the blue chip print makers. And then there's control, so the ability to say, right now there's a high demand in the market, it might be a good time to sell, or right now there seems to be a swell of supply in the market, so I might hold back for 6 months, a year, and so on. And then lastly, transparency. So my career up until 2018 was in the auction market, where there was a huge lack of control, transparency and personalization for the client. There's actually a wonderful level of it when you get to the originals market, where you can ask for a lot from auction houses if you're selling a 1 in a million original artwork in an evening sale. Something like that is a competitive consignment for an auction house, so you can actually ask quite a lot of them. But the prints market is what we call core market, and when you're working with a artwork which is essentially set in a comparables market, that artwork already has a fair market value. So what the algorithm does within MyPortfolio and the valuation product is, instead of these other value databases which track the entire art market, the MyArtBroker algorithm tracks the specific data points we need to for the prints market. So instead of having one artist trend looked at and then perhaps the year and the medium tracked, which is essentially all you see in many other price databases, we're able to look at artwork level, at series level, AP, PP, uniques, hand finished, and add different conditions to that value price, and also look at the overall value of that artist market, as well as, and this is the real key, we're able to look at private sales data because we have been making valuations over the last 15 years. So what you have to remember in the price database world of the art market is you're looking at public auction data, which is actually only 40% of the sales that are going on. So it's estimated that 60% of sales in this particular marketplace happen privately. So you're only looking at a very small segment, and you're also not tracking the unsold rate within that 40%. And we look at, how many unsold prints go to market, particularly in some of the blue chip artists markets in the last 3 years. And actually what you're looking at is a very small segment. So what our algorithm does is looks at demand, supply, valuations, unsold, and the public auction data to give you a fair market value for your artwork. We've already had an amazing reaction to MyPortfolio. Some of our collectors have really engaged in it and have given some of the most valuable feedback. Honestly, it's better than we would have expected. The most important piece now is to make sure it's used by people that it really, really suits. And those are particularly both the established collectors who've maybe built a collection over 20, 30, 40 years and have perhaps been advised by different people throughout that collecting journey. They may have moved artworks on when their lifestyles changed, as well as new people entering the market. They need information very quickly, and they need to be able to understand why that information is what it is, rather than being given it without an explanation. And the ability to say, none of it is in our control. If you work with us on it, it's still in your control at every moment. Everything from, when you want to sell, how much you want to sell it for, what offer you might want to make on another artwork. But I think the most important thing right now is to get that feedback from people and hear from absolutely everybody about how it is to use MyPortfolio. So I get asked this a lot. Friends and clients who have perhaps spent £25,000 on a piece of artwork from an up-and-coming artist, and they say, I love it, I fell in love with it, which is wonderful, and that's exactly what you should do when you start out collecting. But I think there's a barrier for new collectors in the sense that they don't really understand the art world, and so all they really have to fall on is the passion for the art. So you hear a lot of, I just love it, I just fell in love with it. But you can do that and be quite clever with what you buy as well. Most people don't know that they can buy a Warhol, a Hockney, a Hearst, an Emin at the price points that you can within the prints and multiples market. They also don't know how controllable a collection can be. If you were more to spend, then you can look at quite unique Andy Warhols. The American pop market is booming. There is so much to look at when you're starting out. The big piece of advice I would give is that, having worked with collectors for the last 15, 20 years, there's very few of them who started out collecting what they collect now. So from the very get-go, make sure you buy something that you can love, appreciate, get really excited about, but also be able to take it on a journey through your collection and maybe offer it back to the market to buy something else. And if there's a wonderful return on it, then that's a huge bonus. I think MyArtBroker is the perfect tool for people who are starting out, because it's like walking around a gallery with a vast amount of information at your fingertips, It's all the questions that you wanted to ask, but you were maybe a little bit too intimidated to do so, and not given to you as sort of an advisory final, you should or you shouldn't. It's about saying, that artwork that you love, this is the history of it, both financially and from a history of art perspective. Learn about the artwork, and also here's where we think it currently sits in the marketplace. And then seamlessly you can then add that to your MyPortfolio account and be able to see where it tracks in the market. You can then track all the auction histories alongside it. You can track our own private sales data, so that you can make the decision, actually now I've loved it, I've lived with it for 10 years, and actually now might be a really good time to offer it back to the market, and be able to speak to our team, who will then say, I've got 3 people who'd like to buy it, and make that decision when you feel comfortable to do so, rather than consign it into maybe an auction where you have 6 months of, it's consigned but I might still own it, which is quite an uncomfortable feeling. It used to be that there was one particular specialist that looked after a certain type of wine, and everybody would go to that dealer and that specialist, and they would be the only person that held that knowledge, that investment knowledge, and also that specialism that's needed for that market. It's just not the same anymore. You know, there's so much information out there. One of the issues that a collector has is there's too much information, and pricing is just a process of smoke and mirrors. You know, one gallery will have it at this price, another gallery will have it at this price. You'll see an auction result which includes 25% buyer's premium plus VAT on top of that, and you'll be completely confused to why you have a valuation for something completely different. There's too much information out there in the marketplace. And I think what we're starting to see is we've become a market maker for prints and multiples, because we're able to give people very, very concise data. We don't give you one price point, we give you all the price points so you can understand what you're seeing. And I think if you can do that for people, you can cut through a lot of the noise, which is essentially what MyArtBroker and the MyPortfolio product seeks to do.